stream episode, I think, that we're going to put out. Almost season 2, by the way. Season 2 starts when the draft happens. So season 2 starts on Thursday. I think this is going to be the last episode of season 1.
Are we
I
in
am here.
purgatory? Is this lost? What
We
season is
might be.
this?
Yeah, I think the island is moving. We are fully in purgatory. I'm with Adam Oslin. I'm Chuck Mockler. Hope everyone's doing well. You're probably not watching because you're at work, like some of us are maybe supposed to be. But if you missed it, the Clippers have traded away Marcus Morris, Amir Coffey, and the 30th pick to acquire Malcolm Brogdon. Adam, I'll just go to you. Initial thoughts. How are we feeling? The bad man is gone in some people's eyes. How are we feeling initially?
First of all, I think we should show some respect to Marcus Morris, who obviously had a miserable second half of last season, but let's not act like he wasn't a very good Clipper. And they
Absolutely.
wouldn't have gotten past, or they would have been able to get past the Dallas Mavericks without him and those 7 3-pointers in Game 7. He played admirably during those playoffs. I thought he did a lot of the dirty work in 2021 for this squad. When Kawhi went down, Marcus was good against the Phoenix Suns, picking up his scoring. Overall, yeah, they weren't able to win a ring with Marcus Morris, but he certainly wasn't the reason. It was just a lot of bad luck here and there. And Marcus, I think overall should be remembered fondly for his Clippers tenure. I hope
Steep
it's
drop
not too
off.
much recency bias from the last, 6 months.
Yeah, like the year where it was just Reggie and Morris, it was like, what else are we going to do here? Like they did all they could. When Morris was good, those first couple years, it was fantastic. He, I remember one of the first things he did was basically say, Nick Batum should start for me because I'm not playing well. So there was more good than bad for Morris. The bad just happened really quickly right at the end when the Clippers needed some good and a combination of maybe some stubbornness by the coaching staff. But that being said, this feels like a win for the Clippers. Everyone wanted Marcus Morris gone because of what was happening. Malcolm Brogdon, yes, there's injuries and things like that, but it just, I don't know. I'm happy. I'm not like saying this puts the Clippers in some upper echelon of contender status that they weren't in before, but it does make them a little bit better.
Yeah, I think Malcolm Brogdon, bringing him in, he was a guy who was likely sought after last season by the Clippers. The Boston Celtics made it happen. He sacrificed with them. He became their sixth man. He won sixth man of the year. It could have been between him and Norman Powell had he not gotten hurt down the stretch of the season. But Brogdon is a very solid point guard that can also play shooting guard because of his size. He's 6'4". He's a very good defender. I always thought the Milwaukee Bucks, well, it turned out to be the right move in retrospect because they got Drew Holiday. When they didn't match the deal or they didn't want to pay Malcolm Brogdon and they did that sign and trade with Indiana, I thought that was a giant mistake by them. I thought that was going to inevitably lead to them losing Giannis Antetokounmpo and showing that they were going on the cheap. Now they win the championship. Things fell their way. Kevin Durant's foot was on the line in 21. The rest is history. But Malcolm Brogdon, talent-wise, and he does have some injury concerns, but talent-wise, when he's out there on the court, he is one of the better playmakers, one of the better scorers. He's still got plenty of wiggle. He's 30 years of age, but explosiveness, getting downhill, getting to the basket. He was a stud in that series in the second round against the Philadelphia 76ers that they ended up winning in 7 games. Malcolm Brogdon in that series, 16 points for the Boston Celtics last playoffs, 44% from the field, 52% from the outside. I really think part of the reason they ended up losing in the Eastern Conference Finals to Miami was because Brogdon got hurt in Game 1 with that right, I think it was a tendon partial tear in his right arm. Like, they probably win that series that ended up going 7 if Malcolm Brogdon was right. So he's that impactful of a player.
Yeah, and I'm just excited to see what it looks like. We got a guy who can play multiple guard positions, like you mentioned. Locker room wise, I don't really know a whole bunch about his locker room tendencies. I hope it's good. If it's bad, I don't know, that would suck. But this feels like addition by subtraction. I hate that term. But like, let's talk about kind of losing Amir and the pick. We talked about Morris. Obviously, I don't think anyone's really upset about losing Morris, however you might feel about him. Losing the pick. It's the 30th pick. We had Tomer on the show a couple weeks ago, and Tomer Azarli, who totally nailed it. He said that he thought the Clippers would maybe trade out from the first round, and they did. So shout out to Tomer for getting that right.
What about me like a month ago? I thought, what's the point of keeping a pick if you're trying to win a championship right now?
We'll give Adam his credit too. Adam and Tomer called it. Yeah, we don't. That was going to be a guaranteed spot for the Clippers, and number 30 was not going to play for the Clippers next year. I just don't, or probably the year after it. It's just not going to happen. They don't have to use that contract. Trading Amir, I think, sucks more from a sentimental and wordplay perspective. If you watch local broadcasts and love Brian Siemens' puns for Amir Coffee, but like they tried with Amir. If you think he should have got more playing time, I totally get that, but it feels like the Rocco situation. If we have a guy who should get more playing time, but isn't going to be played by the team, why not trade him, right? If nothing's going to change, if Amir's playing time isn't going up, it's not exactly like this was the steal of the part of the draft. Losing 30, I don't feel like great about it, but I'm not mad at the deal overall. It feels like a completely fair situation for the Clippers trying to get off of Marcus Morris.
It makes sense in that last year, I think Lucas Hahn brought this up. The Celtics trade pick number 29 to get Malcolm Brogdon over there when he was 29. Now the Clippers trade pick 30, now that he's 30, a year older, to get him. It makes sense. You're a team trying to win it all right now. Depending on what happens with future moves, I know there's a lot of rumors out there. We'll get to them all. But if you are in win now, championship or bust mode, you got to bring in as much talent as you can, especially at positions of need where they haven't been able to figure out the point guard position. And this also gives them an option of moving everyone up in the starting lineup. If they were able to keep Russell Westbrook, if they did bring in CP3, who knows? Maybe Malcolm Brogdon is at the 2.
I don't know. Yeah.
And then Kawhi's at the 4, like we speculated could happen at times this summer. And you brought up the number before, but I think it was around 30% of the time last season he was playing power forward already. But if they end up with he and Paul George and the 2-1-3 connection era continues here, do they go with a small, big lineup more often? I think that's just the flexibility that Brogdon brings because he can play multiple positions. You speak to, we don't know what he's like in the locker room. I think it's telling that he was willing to sacrifice and come off the bench, embrace it, win 6th man of the year when he had been starting throughout the majority of his career. But he knew the situation with the Boston Celtics. They were also in a win now mode. That was the most talented team, obviously, he's played for. And to his credit, he went 6th man of the year because he's also shooting 44% from 3. So he was getting more open shots. And I thought I read this earlier, but he was only second to Steph Curry when it came to pull-up threes this season, and he shot 44% on those as well. So
you love sensational three-point shooting numbers. If the listeners or watchers remember the John Wall era.
Look, there's no connection to this and John Wall outside the position, maybe. But I think this is a great move for the Clippers. This is something that I'm sure they've been looking at for a while, that they've had their eye on someone like Malcolm Brogdon and him specifically. But to do so, giving up the 30th pick, giving up Marcus Morris, will be sad to see Amir Coffey go. We will not forget the January he had a couple of years ago where he was the team's best player and was holding things together. The comeback victory against Doc Rivers and the Philadelphia 76ers, where he had the big bucket down the stretch of that ball game. Amir Coffey, and it will be sad not hearing all the puns with Brian Seaman anymore, but he also made his mark as a Clipper and was an under-the-radar fan favorite at times that people just love to root for, but it was a logjam at that position. It was always going to be hard to get minutes. We knew that coming into this past year. And he
didn't play well. Like, that's what sucks too. Like, when Amir played, it was not ideal, I guess, would be how you could maybe phrase it.
In a similar fashion to Robert Covington, though, when he really struggled early on getting spot minutes here and there, I think
Yeah.
it's just hard to catch a rhythm when you don't know when you're going to be playing, how much you're going to be playing, how you're going to be used. That's a difficult situation, especially for a younger player, as opposed to somebody like Robert
He is
Covington.
26. Like, it's,
Yeah,
you know,
on the younger side,
for the
relative to the
Clippers.
Clippers
Relative to the Clippers'
roster.
age, he's a young guy. Yeah. And you look at his numbers, 38% from the floor, 27% from three. Not a lot of attempts, but it just wasn't. It wasn't really there for him this year. And it sucks to lose, but I don't know. I don't understand how you cannot be somewhat excited about this trade. Well, somewhat excited feels like the perfect amount. I wouldn't be over the moon, but I would be, oh, the Clippers got a little bit better for the window that they have right now.
I think it could be significant, and it really just comes down to health. I know we've heard this over and over again, and they're bringing in another guy who has been injury prone. He had the plantar fasciitis a few years ago. He had the Achilles injury his last season with the Indiana Pacers, where he played just 36 games. Last season he played 67, but then unfortunately went out in the Eastern Conference Finals and was playing limited minutes after the right arm injury. So there's reasons to be concerned health-wise, but when you look at what they gave up for the potential of Malcolm Brogdon when he's right, it's obviously a no-brainer and a great move for this organization.
Yeah, and you look at the window, like, you have to do it. You have to save a little bit of, maybe Ty saving him from himself a little bit when it comes to working on kind of locker room vibes and everything like that. He was in a weird position, I think, too. We got some questions in the chat on YouTube. It said, glad Mook is out, but what's next for Gordon or Powell? Do we keep both? I think Gordon's guaranteed salary mark is in like a week or so. That's when
the 26th.
Yeah, something like that. That's when his becomes guaranteed. I think they would probably lean keeping Norm over Gordon, but I have no idea. This also might not be the first move. I don't think this might not be the only move. I mean, like, this is. It feels like there's something more happening. I don't know. We're going to talk about it tomorrow, but do you think this is the end of the Clippers moves?
No, especially because of some of the rumors that are out there regarding CP3, regarding Paul George. We know they work in stealth, and typically what's being reported, unless it's imminent that the deal is about to get done, like we saw with Shams earlier today, there aren't a lot of murmurs. There's not a lot of scuttlebutt, as you like to say, with the Clippers, that ends up coming to fruition with this front office because people just don't have the intel. They don't leak. They don't talk a lot. We saw a lot of stuff go down in the dead of night.
Except for the Marcus Morris trade. That was, everyone was just like, okay.
But that also could have been because the other team was talking, because the Lakers were involved also, and it was that arms race at the end of the trade deadline to see who gets Marcus Morris at the time, back in, 2020 now. So it's hard to know what's real and what isn't. I do have faith in this front office. I think Lawrence Frank, as president of basketball operations, just a couple of years removed from winning executive of the year, should give you that faith, should give you a lot of confidence in the moves they're going to make, that they realized at the end of this season in talking about how the regular season has to be more respected. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but they know where their weaknesses lie. So I don't think they're done, especially because when you have a lot of guys on one-year deals and you still have somewhat of a log jam, not having Amir Coffey, not having Marcus Morris, okay, that opens things up more for Batum and Robert Covington. But we don't know Rokos and Batum. They're both on one-year deals, right?
Yeah.
The rest of the way. So they have a lot of tradable expiring contracts on this Clippers team that could be sought after in deals. That could be sweeteners. So I don't think they're done. I don't think this is going to be the final, shoot or drop for this team. But we'll see. We might find out a lot in the next 24 hours here.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a stream tomorrow at like 6. Who knows when the draft actually starts, but we'll be talking about the Clippers moves. Where are we at on the PG stuff? Do we think that's real at all? Do we think PG? I know Mark Stein reported it. You tweeted out some stuff about how Mark Stein also talked about how Kawhi wasn't going to re-sign with the Clips. And then I think an hour later, he put pen to paper for the Clippers. So, like, I don't know. And there was the report that the Clippers are kind of leaving opposing teams at the minimum, feeling like they would include Paul George. Like, is it just pocket sand? Is it all scuttlebutt? Does it mean anything?
I don't want to be too harsh on Mark Stein because I know he's an accredited reporter, but if you just look at the last 5 years, who are the guys that drop the big stories? It's either Shams, it's Chris Haynes, or it's Adrian Wojnarowski. I can't think of
Full name, damn.
the last time. It's like saying Giannis Antetokounmpo. You just sound smarter if you can pull it off somehow.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the last time Mark Stein broke a story that would be pretty significant if the move was Paul George for the number 3, which ends up becoming Scoot. I want to say it's more about reading tea leaves like we all have since Portland started to dangle their pick and we're looking for a small forward. It was just connecting dots. It was trying to see how the Clippers could fit in here. But that's not to say he's wrong, that the Clippers aren't necessarily gauging and doing their due diligence of what a player's value is. Because I think that's pretty standard during the summertime.
You got to.
Everybody is like the Portland Trailblazers.
You're not just hanging your phone up.
Yeah, or slamming the phone down whenever someone's calling to ask about Damian Lillard. That's a very unique situation. And given the injury history of both Kawhi and Paul George, you could rationalize it like, okay, we can't afford to have 2 guys that are this injury prone. What if we traded one of them? And it just so happens the Portland Trailblazers might be interested in making a deal with their top pick. I don't know still how reasonable it is to believe that Charlotte's not going to take Scoot, as we heard from Law Murray last week. I know Adrian Wojnarowski did bring up a report yesterday talking about how they're in on Brandon Miller, who, by the way, earlier today, there was a video of him saying his GOAT is Paul George, which makes sense. He's 6'9". He probably models his game after him. But
someone pointed out his age, too. If you look at his age, he grew up watching kind of, I don't know about peak Paul George, but pretty close to peak Paul George when he was coming up. So I just didn't.
Paul George was the 360 right before he got hurt against OKC. Like Paul George is still happening. I don't want to act like he's some washed player. He's just been injury prone.
Right.
When he's out there on the court, he can still do everything. There was the dunk last season.
When he wants to.
That was eerily similar to the dunk on Birdman in 2013 when you did the side-by-side. It was the exact same elevation, the exact same dunk from PG-13. So, I understand why a team will want to pull him in like the Portland Trailblazers if they're hell-bent on trying to get Dame help and competing and giving him one last shot to win a championship in Portland before they end up moving him, which I do think is inevitable at some point. But I don't know if, from the Clippers' point of view, it's worth giving up on Paul George right now, even if you are getting Scoot with the 3rd pick, because does that get you closer to winning a championship this season? And now we see the move for Malcom Brogdon, and it looks like, okay, that would mean even less time on the court for Scoot. And there's
just
connecting dots myself.
Yeah, like Chris Paul and stuff too. Like, it's like, what?
Russell Westbrook, can they re-sign him still? There's still a lot in the air.
I think Law reported basically like if we got Chris Paul, we wouldn't get Russ because Russ was going to take a little bit over the minimum, but that was before kind of this Chris Paul stuff started. So I'm not sure if there'd be money for both. I'm not 100% sure on that. I mean, I would not be upset if we don't have both of Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul, but it seems like it would maybe be Chris Paul.
It would seem like a lot of insurance policies at that position all of a sudden. Okay,
literally,
if this guy goes down,
figuratively.
If Malcolm Brogdon isn't able to go more than 67 games like this season, okay, but we have CP3 and in a limited role off the bench, is he able to stay healthier longer? He had a very solid regular season for them and was doing fine in the playoffs before he went down. He did get exposed at times with the Clippers looking for him or leaving him open. He didn't shoot the ball well from the outside with the Phoenix Suns. But it's hard to tell exactly what that ultimate plan is right now with the Clippers because of this Paul George situation. Like that could change a lot of things. That could turn into a ripple effect or a domino effect where all of a sudden, are they going to blow it up? Are they going to trade Kawhi Leonard?
Chaos. Yeah.
If we go off of what Lawrence Frank said in his exit interview after this season, it was all about investing in those guys for the long term. We expect them to be here for the long term. Things change, though. The right deal comes along. You have to be flexible. We saw that with Blake Griffin. We saw that with Tobias Harris. So it's not as simple as just going off of, I agree he was sincere and meant it when he said it. But if Portland really is willing to give up the 3 and Scoot's going to be there, you have to at least think about that
You
deal.
gotta think about it. Like, yeah, and a lot of people were saying like, oh, the Clippers would only make that trade if Scoot's for sure available at 3. You're not going to know that until Charlotte makes their pick. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. I just don't believe in like, oh, we swear this other team's going to take this guy.
Charlotte should be in no position to taking best fit over best player available. When you're this bad, you should always go best player available. I know they have LaMelo. I would still try to make that work. I think the Kings still made a mistake trading Tyrese Halliburton long-term for Sabonis, even after the season that they had. I think they're going to end up regretting it eventually, just because they didn't want to have a glut of guards or another guy competing for the ball with De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell. I don't think that's the way to go when you're a team that's in the dregs, and the Charlotte Hornets are right now.
They have the number 2 pick for a reason.
Now, maybe Brandon Miller turns out to be a stud, and he is the next Paul George. But I would take the most sure thing at the number 2 pick, and that is, I think, Scoot Henderson. In most drafts, everybody would be talking about him number 1, but we have this transformative player in Victor and Wembanyama who's coming out this season, a guy like we've never seen before. Otherwise, all the talk is about Scoot, right? So I don't understand why Charlotte wouldn't. I understand it is a fit thing with LaMelo, but when you're that bad, you just have to get the most talented guy.
Just get the guy who's good. Like, just do that.
What do you think? I'm interested in what you think, Charles, regarding the Clippers rumors, what Mark Stein said about them gauging offers or value on Paul George, and whether or not they should or would pull the trigger on a trade with Portland if it's the number 3, if it's inevitably getting Scoot and Anthony Simons.
I've gone back and forth on this. I think I was talking to Brian Cullen about this. I did the Clip Set pod on Sunday, and I said, like, up until the Chris Paul news, I was having a great offseason. I was just willfully ignorant of any horrible moves that might come into play for the Clippers. But now I've been thinking about this the Paul George and the number 3 trade, which I talked about we've talked about it before, but man, if you can guarantee to get Simons, and it has to be Scoot. I don't like Brandon Miller. I would be like, right? Like, we got another 4, I guess. Like, I'm not sure he's going to start. If it's Simons, Scoot, and then there has to be another contract thrown in, right, for the money to match. So it's either Nurk. I don't think we're getting Shaden Sharp. Everyone really is high on him because he might be good. So I think it would probably be Nurk, Simons, and the 3 pick for PG. I mean, only if that pick is Scoot, would I be into it. If it's not Scoot, I'm kind of out. You're adding a guy who is a position the Clippers need. He's a guy that Clippers fans would fall in love with. I don't watch college basketball. Well, I don't watch Ignite basketball, but I've obviously been watching highlights the past couple of days. Clippers fans would absolutely fall in love with Scoot. He's he's huge. He plays like Patrick Beverley, but with more skill and athleticism is kind of how I feel about his game. And I think if you're Ballmer, if Scoot becomes the man, you have this new generation bridging to the old, in quotes, because it is sports, so 3 years and your era's over. One with Kawhi Leonard, right? Like, you have this kind of passing of the torch thing that might happen. So I think as of 2:19 p.m. on June 21st, I would do Scoot, Simons, and whatever the filler is for PG. I think I would do it. But that could also maybe change at 2:21. So I don't know. Because right, like there's good and bad for both things. Where I'm like, it'd be a really weird, trippy way for the 2-1-3 era to end. But it would feel a little exciting that it's not a full teardown. It's not even like a quasi teardown. We traded PG for the number 3 pick. And we're getting a guy who theoretically is supposed to be the man. And then whatever other pieces we move around. So 2:19, I'm holding strong. I would do the trade.
Within 30 seconds, You can really talk yourself into it or
It's
out of it when it
right.
comes to this. It's
That's
not
what I
an easy
mean.
decision
Yeah,
because I think the excitement surrounding the draft, and I've been talking about this for years just because I have a memory or at least look things up. Everybody gets talked about on draft night like they have all-star potential.
totally.
Go back a 10-year window from 2006 to 2016. I say it all the time. That's 100 top 10 draft picks. There have been about 27 all-stars coming out of top 10 picks. There have been more busts or guys who never lived up to their potential than there were all-stars. Everybody says it's a sure thing. And maybe it is with Scoot. I think he's a lot like a young Baron Davis, speaking of Charlotte. To me, he looks like Baron Davis with the way he moves out there, his shot a little bit, his handle, how ready he is physically for the game at this level. He's even much stronger
He's
than
huge,
Baron Davis.
Dude.
He's ripped.
Makes no sense how he's 19 too. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. And maybe he does become their next SGA if they bring him in. But I think everyone's just assuming that's what would happen.
Correct.
And I do want to throw out there, you never know with potential and young players. You never know. What if he turned out to be injury prone? What if he turned out to have issues in the locker room? Like, there's so many things that get covered up during the draft process because guys are looking to get paid and looking to get drafted at the highest point in the draft if possible. So it's not as easy as just, well, Paul George is injury prone. We've had it with this 2-1-3 era. We're souring on it. We're going to get rid of one of them. I don't know if it's that simple of a decision because then does it lead to Kawhi being moved? Then does it lead to...
There's no way they're not running this by Kawhi. I just can't see Kawhi not being asked about this. I know we joke about Portland and Dame, but I think Kawhi and the Clippers have a similar relationship in terms of talking to their star player. They just don't talk about it to other people as much.
Yeah. And Paul George was recently saying this on a podcast that they collaborate, that he has the ear of Lawrence Frank. And that's been evident throughout his tenure with the Clippers.
No shit. Yeah.
So does this move with Malcolm Brogdon, though, does it give any insight one way or another to whether or not they would bring in Scoot, to whether or not they would make that move?
I don't think so. I think if the option was trade for Malcolm Brogdon or trade for Scoot, and they chose trade for Malcolm Brogdon, I'd be pretty bummed out. I don't think this affects it. The Clippers are always trying to get better they force these. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do. They force these position gluts on themselves, right? We've seen them do it with point guards. We've seen them do it with power forwards, everything but the center position. But I don't think it affects it at all. There's so many. Have the teams even seen the new CBA yet? Because that's the other crazy part, is that when Law told us that teams don't even have the CBA yet, I feel like there's no way that this is indicative of what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, a million things could happen between now and tomorrow night.
We've got differing views from some of our viewers here. Racy Marlin. I don't know. Marlin says, I'm from Fresno and love PG, but I'm taking Scoot 100%. Dennis Zapata says, trading PG is no longer an option. We're going all in. I love PG, and I like the potential of Scoot. But I do find it interesting that somebody would that quickly jump off of Paul George, who is arguably a top 75 player of all time. Like, he was right there. You can make the argument I think he's better than Damian Lillard, who made top 75. Yes, I think Damian Lillard has
more accomplishments.
Yes, in every way, including leading teams in the Eastern Conference and in the Western Conference to conference finals as the number one guy. I know Dame has done it once when things broke their way and CJ McCollum took over in that Game 7 in Denver. But Paul George, I don't know. His greatness is getting overlooked a little bit here, I feel like. And maybe it's just because
it's the new shiny thing. Yeah. It's the new shiny potential thing versus something that has, on the whole, disappointed Clippers fans in terms of an availability and sometimes mentality thing.
How quickly we forget, though. After the 2021 playoff run, everybody was tipping their cap to Paul George and saying, you're the man, you're the right guy next to Kawhi Leonard. You can be the number 2 on a championship team and at times lead as the number 1. He played so well. Those game 5s were historic against Utah and then against the Phoenix Suns. He did step up. The playoff P stuff and making fun of him for that got put on the back burner finally.
Absolutely.
So we're not that far removed from that. I think he's still that same player. It's just getting him on the court enough.
He also, the availability thing, very hard to argue with. That's been the mark of the 2-3 era up to this point. Well, and then
Marlon thinks he's a top 10 player. He's responding now in the league.
Yes. Skill-wise, absolutely. Does he want to be a top 10 player? I'm not entirely sure. I think this is why I don't like that he has his podcast because he just talks about shit. I think it's fine to have a podcast, but I'm like, PG, you're the player who everyone is like, he doesn't really seem like he has that in him or whatever. You know what I mean? But
I put that stuff aside from actual on-court productivity, like what we saw in 2021. Like for Paul George and how much he has been mocked about the podcast and certain things he has said that sounds like double speak. What does that matter compared to what he actually did in a tough situation with the Clippers when Kawhi went down? I'm not saying there's rationality behind it.
I would just when when he's and like he puts his foot in his mouth. We're in the driver's seat. We feel fine. I'm fine with being a number. Like he says things where like, sure, when you sit down and think about them, they make sense. But unfortunately, this is not the sports media world we're in anymore.
Well, I just want to know from people in the comment section now, are you okay with having worse odds to win the championship, which you'll likely have if you make that move with trading Paul George for Scoot? Like
I have a feeling that they're going to say yes 100%. We're okay with that. So because we're not exactly like they have worse chances to win the championship. Sure. How much worse? Like that's a discussion too. Like how much worse is it with Paul George and without Paul George, you add Scoot, Simons, Nurk. Like obviously it's worse, but is it 15% worse?
Yeah.
Is it 25%? Because if it's not over 20, you're like, huh?
Some of it could just depend on Simons and how much more growth he has in him towards whatever his ceiling is. And I've liked Simons a lot.
So does Will. Yeah.
I was high on him when he came out. And last season, at times, he looked like one of the most lethal scorers at that age that we have seen in some times. He could catch a heater and just be absolutely unstoppable out there. The problem is defensive deficiencies. People aren't thinking about the other side of the ball where Paul George is so great at with defensively. That stuff's going to be missed. So look, I'm open to both. Like I said, I could talk myself in and out of making this move. It's that difficult, and it may depend on who else the Clippers give up. If Terrence Mann is included in that trade, would you want to do it still?
No, because that's the other part is like everyone has all these hangups. And if Terrence Mann because we're also getting something big, like we're not getting just like Nurk as the filler if we're adding Terrence Mann for that. Because I think you have to add another contract because his extension kicked in. So that would hurt. I don't want to trade Terrence Mann for Chris Paul. I don't even think we're going to trade for Chris Paul. I think that's going to be maybe they cut him and then we just sign him or something. But it would be tough to lose Terrence Mann. He's a guy who everyone, I'm pretty sure watching this or who listens to our podcast thinks should get more playing time from the Clippers. Will he, though? I want him to, but it's that Rocco question of will he actually do it? We all want these things to happen, but will it happen? Which is why Amir gets traded. So I think Terrence would maybe be a hang-up for me. Losing Terrence would hurt. He's one of our most versatile defenders. He does whatever the hell they ask him to do. That would hurt. And he's gotten incrementally better each season. So that one would hurt. And he's the only good Clippers draft pick we've kept in the last 5 years.
Some were talking about, are they going to have to include Brandon Boston? Would he go to Boston? Would that happen in this trade? And to be fair, it hasn't been fully realized yet, or it hasn't been, the trade hasn't been fully consummated. once the teams actually put out press releases, that's when it is official. So we're still just going off of what Shams and what Woj
Would you include
are
Terrence
reporting
in the trade for number 3?
Probably not. I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I feel like I'm a little bit more grounded when it comes to the draft than some people. Like I'm sorry, but nothing is guaranteed. Like Scoot could be. I remember when Marcus Smart was coming out and they were comparing him to Dwayne Wade. I'm old enough to remember that. They thought he had the potential of Dwayne Wade. Now he is a good player, but offensively, he's nowhere close to that.
Right. Rui was getting Kawhi comparisons when he was coming out, which I just felt so bad for Rui. He didn't want that. No one wants that.
People fall in love with potential so much that they overlook what's already right in front of you at times. And I think Paul George is starting to become a little bit underrated. I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair.
Now, maybe after what Brandon Miller said today, that'll change. That balances things out since he called
him if it does.
The GOAT. Yeah. But I think there is something to a bird in the hand. And if you still have Kawhi Leonard on this team, you want the best chance to win now. Because regardless of another guy playing 82 games and being healthier out there, if he's a lesser player than Paul George, that still doesn't get you closer to a championship. You may have a better regular season,
but how much further away? That's what it is.
And I think
if it's only 10%, because it's like that question about upgrading Zoo, right? Remember we talked about it? We're like, all right, we're paying Zoo effectively no money to be the most consistent player for the Clippers, and he's really good defensively. Is it worth the 15% jump in ability for someone who gets paid 3 times as much? Right? So it's like, if we're taking a 5%, 7% step back, I'm talking like these are actual percentages we can figure out. It's not too bad. I'm excited for whatever the hell's going to happen, because this does not feel like it's the last thing to happen.
No.
I didn't think Morris was going to be the first guy traded. I'll tell you that much. I thought it was going to be Rocco. We don't play the guy. I thought Rocco was going to be gone.
It's an easy win for the Clippers, given what they gave up to bring in somebody like Malcom Brogdon. It's a big victory today, Clipper Nation. This was somebody that I think a lot of people had targeted last season to try to get him. Even before that, it just makes sense fit-wise. He's great for this team. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, though, he does come with injury concerns. You have to take that into account, too.
That's how we live. Like, the injury thing
What's
sucks.
One more?
Yeah, what's one more? Like, the injury thing sucks. That is obviously the biggest, I think, red flag for Brogdon. We'll probably see if Kawhi, PG, and Brogdon are all on the team starting next year. I bet we see 30 games of them all together, fully active. Would be my guess. All of them.
I'm gonna hope
all 3 of them together. I hope for more too, but 30 doesn't feel too far off.
You need injury luck.
The
Denver Nuggets had a guy coming off an ACL. He never missed a playoff game this year. And a guy who is still dealing with a chronic back injury that could flare up at any moment. And Michael Porter Jr. as well still stay healthy throughout the playoffs. That may not happen again.
Did you see how Doc was talking about how Michael Porter Jr. was playing with rods in his back? And then Michael Porter Jr.'s dad was like, no, the fuck he is not. He absolutely is not playing with rods in his
Better
back.
Playing with rods than playing with your meat or whatever Doc Rivers said
playing before. Yeah, man. Classic Doc. All right. Some of us are getting emails that maybe we should have to answer because it is work hours. Adam, what do we have on deck for these wonderful people tomorrow?
We're going to talk draft, even though the Clippers just lost their pick, but we'll talk more of the bigger picture in free agency. I'm not somebody, full disclosure, if you couldn't tell by now, that gets as excited as some for the NBA draft. Maybe if you're in San Antonio, that's very understandable. If you're in Charlotte, if you're in Portland, could that change if the Clippers trade for Scoot? Yes, of course.
If the Clippers trade for free, I'm gonna lose my mind. I might order the jersey if they draft Scoot, but the jersey would say Scoot. It would not say his last name. It would just say Scoot. I'd go Carl Tard on it.
That's a new era if they end up doing that. We would be entering a new era of Clippers basketball, or at least a different phase of the 2-1-3, now just the 2 era with Kawhi Leonard, should they trade Paul George for him. But who knows what, chain of events that could set off. So yeah. There's a lot to be discussed. We'll get to all of it tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have a clearer picture by then.
I hope it's murkier
regarding this trade.
I hope there's more rumors. Eric Gordon might be on the move. Who knows? But yeah, we'll be back with y'all tomorrow. Adam, where can these people find us? And all of us on Twitter and all that good stuff. Will Updike not here, usually here, the third of the Clips and Dip. He's the green guy if you're watching this on YouTube.
Will is not leaving us just because he wasn't on the last few shows, okay? He's just busy
or
more responsible.
He's busy, yeah.
We love Will. We miss him. Shout out Will Updike. But you can find us at Clippers Pod on Twitter, at Clippers Podcast on YouTube, where this will be uploaded pretty much immediately in the live section of our YouTube channel there. I'm at Follow Adam A. Chuck, where are you at?
I am at Chuck Mockler on Twitter. Come hang. It's going to be a good time. I'm going to be on there probably way too much these next couple days. And yeah, if we get Scoot, I will live stream me ordering the Scoot jersey. I make that a promise. I'm somehow Team Scoot now. It's going to change in 5 minutes. But thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Hope you didn't get fired for listening to us at work. Or if you did, let us know. That would be pretty cool, I guess. All right.
Worth
talk to y'all
it.
tomorrow. We're totally